I don't know exactly when life stopped feeling like something I was living and started feeling like something I was surviving. But I think it was sometime around the second week of January. The cold had settled into Michigan like a second skin. The kind that didn't peel off no matter how many layers you wore or how high you cranked the heat. Our little house on the east side of Lansing groaned under the weight of the snow, and so did I. At 35, I didn't expect to be scrambling this hard. I had always pictured adulthood as a kind of steady climb. Maybe not smooth, maybe not glamorous, but manageable. But after we had our baby in October, life stopped being a hill and started feeling more like a mountain I wasn't equipped to climb. Her name is Ava. 3 months old and already the center of my universe. She had my nose and my wife's eyes, soft hazel, always blinking at the world like it owed her an explanation. She was the kind of baby people described as easy, because she didn't cry much. But when she did, her voice carried through the house like a siren you couldn't ignore. I loved her more than anything I'd ever loved before, but I'd be lying if I said I wasn't overwhelmed most days. Before Ava, it was just Nicole and me. We met in 2015 in a hospital cafeteria of all places. She was in nursing school, and I was working IT support for the hospital system. She asked me if I could help her print something on a locked-down computer, and I joked that I only helped pretty nurses. She laughed and told me to stop flirting unless I planned to back it up with dinner. I backed it up with dinner, then a movie, then 3 years of living together in a one-bedroom apartment over a bakery on Walnut Street. In 2019, we got married in a small ceremony at her parents' place in Traverse City. It was nothing extravagant, just 50 people, some fairy lights and a homemade cake that leaned a little too far left. But it was perfect. We were perfect, at least it felt that way. Nicole had always been driven. She picked up extra shifts at the hospital like it was second nature and finished her RN program with honors. When she got hired full-time at Sparrow Hospital, we both breathed easier for a while. We even dared to dream a little. Maybe a bigger place. Maybe a trip to Ireland one day. I was doing IT contract work, which was inconsistent but flexible. That worked for us then. We didn't have much, but we had enough. And then the pandemic hit. Nicole got pulled into 12-hour shifts. I lost a big contract when a company downsized. We burned through our savings in 6 months. Between rent, car payments, and her student loans, we started to feel like we were always chasing the next paycheck and losing ground. We bought the house in 2022, thinking it was the right move. I'd found steady work again, and she was doing well. But then Ava came along sooner than we'd planned. Don't get me wrong, I wouldn't trade her for the world. But diapers, formula, pediatrician visits, and a mortgage, it added up fast. We were drowning quietly. No one knew it, but I picked up a second job in late December. A security gig at a warehouse just outside the city. Nights and weekends, I'd sleep in the car between shifts sometimes, just to save gas and time. Nicole didn't like it. She said I was burning myself out. But what else was I supposed to do? We needed the money, and she was already doing as much as she could. Or so I thought. I don't want to make her out to be the villain here. Nicole is kind, smart, and sharp in ways that have always made me admire her. But in hindsight, I can see that we'd started living in two different emotional worlds. She was quieter lately, not distant exactly, but preoccupied. Sometimes I'd catch her staring off in the middle of feeding Ava, like she was someplace else entirely. I figured it was exhaust or postpartum, or just the weight of being new parents trying to balance too many plates. I didn't push. I should have, but I didn't. There were moments that should have raised questions. Little one, like when I'd suggest putting an extra 100 toward the credit card and she'd say let's wait until next month. Or when I asked if she thought we could afford a small weekend getaway in the spring and she gave me this look like I was asking if we could buy a boat. I remember thinking, God, are we really this broke? The funny thing is, I still brought her flowers once a week, just the $5 grocery store ones. But I thought maybe they would make her smile, and they usually did, though sometimes her smile felt forced, like it was painted on just for me. We were slipping into survival mode, but I was too wrapped up in working, budgeting, and making it to sunrise to realize it. The night before everything changed, we sat on the couch after putting Ava down. The room was dim, just the glow of the TV and a couple of warm yellow lamps. She leaned into me and I remember this so vividly. It was the first time in weeks I felt like we were in sync again. We didn't talk much, we just sat there. She had her head on my chest, I had my hand on her arm, and then she said almost absent-mindedly, "I wish we had more money." I kissed her hair and said, "We will, just a little longer. I'm working on it." She didn't say anything back, just nodded slowly and kept watching the screen. That moment felt small at the time, like a passing comment, but I'd go on to replay it 100 times in my head, over and over, trying to hear something in her voice I hadn't caught then. A hint, a warning, but there was nothing, just silence. I think that's what haunts me the most. It started with a receipt, not a dramatic discovery, not a private investigator, not some secret text message flashing across a screen. Just a stupid receipt that came with the mail one afternoon, while Nicole was out grocery shopping and I was home alone with Ava, who had finally passed out after a 2-hour screaming marathon. The envelope was plain, no branding, no return address. It was wedged between a gas bill and a flyer for window replacements. I almost threw it out thinking it was junk, but something about the paper just a little heavier than usual made me tear it open. Inside was a printed transaction confirmation from Midland Credit Union, a bank I didn't recognize. It was for a savings account balance update. At the top, clear as day, was Nicole's full name. I don't remember how long I stared at the number before I blinked. I thought it was a mistake, had to be, maybe a printing error or someone else with her name. My heart started hammering in my chest, that weird kind of thud where you feel every beat echo in your ears. I turned the paper over, checked it again. It listed the last 4 digits of the account, the routing number, everything. It was hers. The room went completely silent. You know that kind of silence that isn't peaceful? The kind that feels like pressure building before a storm breaks. That's what it was. Ava was asleep in the bassinet next to me, completely unaware that something seismic had just shifted in our lives. I waited. I paced. I thought about calling her, but my hands were shaking. I didn't know what I would even say. My mind ran through every possibility. Inherit, some side account for work, maybe her parents gave her money. But if any of that were true, why wouldn't she tell me? We had been counting pennies for months. I had taken a second job. I barely slept, and she was sitting on over 200. When she came home about 40 minutes later, the first thing she noticed was that I hadn't taken the trash out. She looked at me, bags of groceries in hand, and said half-jokingly, "Rough afternoon." I didn't say anything. I just handed her the paper. Her face didn't change right away. That, more than anything, told me she already knew what it was. She read it once, then again. Then she folded it back up, set it on the kitchen counter, and started unpacking the groceries like nothing had happened. That's when the bottom dropped out. I asked her in the calmest voice I could manage where the money came from. She said, "It's savings," just like that, like it was the most normal thing in the world. I remember repeating the word back to her, savings, like I hadn't heard it right. She didn't look at me, just kept pulling items from the brown paper bags, bread, a pack of chicken, diapers. I asked her again, "Where did this come from? Why didn't you tell me?" She finally turned to face me, and her expression was cold. Not angry, not guilty, just tired. She said something like, "I don't have to explain everything to you, it's my money." That's when the argument started. I don't remember every word. My voice got louder, hers sharper. At one point she told me to stop acting like I was entitled to her personal finances. I said, "We're married, we have a baby, we share everything. Or at least I thought we did." She didn't back down. She accused me of being controlling, of prying, of assuming the worst about her. She told me the money was none of my business. I think that's when something broke in me. Because here's the thing. I never wanted her money. If she'd told me she'd been quietly saving for years, I would have felt proud. If she said it was an emergency stash for Ava's future, I would have hugged her. If she told me she was scared we'd fail and needed a safety net, hell, I might have cried with her. But she didn't tell me anything. She just kept denying me access, kept treating me like I was some outsider poking around where I didn't belong. That's when the fear kicked in. Because if someone can hide this from you, what else can they hide? I couldn't stop thinking back to all the nights I'd been out, half asleep in a freezing car, trying to make sure we could afford formula and keep the lights on. The skipped dinner, the canceled birthday plans. The time I sold my old PS5 because we needed an extra $300 to cover the gas bill. And she had a secret safety vault the entire time. That night we didn't speak. She slept in the guest room with Ava's bassinet. I stayed in our room, staring at the ceiling like the answers might be written in the popcorn texture above me. I didn't sleep. Not a minute. At one point I got up and walked around the house like a ghost, touching little things: our wedding photo on the shelf, the stained rocking chair I'd fixed when Nicole was pregnant, the used copy of The Baby Whisperer I'd bought from a thrift store, because she said she was scared we wouldn't know what to do. I kept asking myself the same question over and over again. Who is she really? It felt like I'd been living with a stranger, like the woman I fell in love with had left quietly sometime in the past year, and I hadn't even noticed. The next morning I called in sick to both jobs. I just couldn't face anyone, couldn't pretend everything was fine when my life was suddenly full of holes. Nicole acted like nothing had happened. She made coffee, changed Ava, even asked if I wanted toast. I looked at her and felt this weird mixture of love and resentment, like I was grieving someone who wasn't dead, just unreachable. By noon I asked her one last time. Why? Why didn't you tell me about the money? She didn't yell. She didn't even raise her voice. She just said, because I knew you'd react like this. Then she walked away. That's when I realized it wasn't just about the money. It never was. It was about the space between us that had grown so slowly, so subtly, that neither of us had noticed until we were on opposite sides of a secret we couldn't cross. There's a strange kind of numbness that comes after a deep emotional hit, like when you fall and scrape your knee as a kid before the pain kicks in. There's that quiet second where your body hasn't processed what just happened. That's how I felt for days after finding out about the secret account. It wasn't just it was something worse, something hollow and quiet and relentless. I went back to work, but I moved like a ghost through the hour. I showed up for the security shift at night, standing under flickering fluorescent lights with a clipboard in one hand and a cold cup of gas station coffee in the other, staring into empty loading docks and asking myself the same damn question over and over. What else don't I know? During the day I'd come home and play with Ava. She was the only thing grounding me. She'd giggle and grab at my face like nothing had changed. And for a few precious moments I could almost forget that everything else was cracking. Nicole and I barely spoke. We'd become polite strangers, passing each other like roommates sharing space but not lives. She stopped sleeping in the guest room after a few days but didn't come back to our bed. She started sleeping on the couch with the baby monitor on the coffee table next to her. Said she didn't want to wake me when Ava cried in the night. But that wasn't it. I knew it wasn't. It was avoidance. It was guilt, or maybe defiance. I couldn't tell anymore. What gutted me most wasn't just that she'd hidden something. It was the way she refused to let me in afterward. No apology, no context, no vulnerability, just stone walls and cold shoulders, like I was the one who'd violated her privacy. I didn't tell anyone, not my brother, not my parents, not even my best friend Josh, who usually knew everything going on in my life. I was too embarrassed, too broken, because how do you even say something like that out loud? Hey man, turns out my wife had nearly $250,000 stashed away while I was picking up graveyard shifts and skipping meals to save money. I kept thinking about our wedding vow, about how we said for richer or poorer and promised transparency and trust, about how I believed with every inch of my being that we were a team. But it wasn't just the financial betrayal, that was the surface level wound. What cut deeper was the realization that Nicole had stopped trusting me long before I ever knew something was wrong, that she had built an emotional bunker and locked me out without a warning sign. I tried in those first couple of weeks to salvage things. I made dinner one night, nothing fancy, just spaghetti and garlic bread. She ate in silence, barely touching her food. Ava was in her high chair, flinging peas with the joy only babies can summon. I asked Nicole if she wanted to talk. She just shook her head and muttered, "I'm tired." So was I. But I kept trying. One afternoon I wrote her a letter. I didn't know what else to do. I sat at the kitchen table while Ava napped and poured my heart out on 3 pages of lined paper. Told her how much I loved her, how confused I was, how scared. I asked her to help me understand, just tell me the truth, whatever it was. I left the letter on her pillow. She never mentioned it, not even once. I began to spiral quietly, not in some dramatic movie montage way, but in the subtle erosion of routine and hope. I stopped shaving, stopped responding to texts. My manager at the IT company pulled me aside and asked if everything was okay. I lied and said I was just tired from the new baby. He nodded. Everyone nods when you say that. No one asks more. I started sleeping on the floor of the nursery some night. I'd lie on the rug next to Ava's crib, listening to her little breaths in the dark, wondering how the hell we ended up here. There were nights I stared at the ceiling and thought, Maybe this is it. Maybe this is what marriage looks like after the shiny part fades. But I didn't want to believe that. I couldn't, because I still loved her. God help me. I still loved Nicole, even when she looked at me like I was the enemy. Even when she spoke to me like a coworker instead of a husband. Even when I found myself sitting in the parked car outside our house at night, dreading the walk to the front door. Then one morning, I opened the laptop to pay bills and noticed our main checking account had less than $20 in it. I blinked. That wasn't possible. I'd just gotten paid 2 days ago. I scrolled through the transactions. A transfer $600 to an external account. I called the bank. The rep confirmed the account belonged to Nicole. That was the first time I got angry. Real visceral rage in the gut angry. She hadn't just kept the money hidden. She was now pulling funds from our joint account, during a time when we were scraping by and still refusing to talk to me. I confronted her that evening. I wasn't yelling. I wasn't swearing, but I was shaking with fury. I asked her, "Are you moving money now? What are you doing? Planning to leave?" She didn't answer, just stood there, arms crossed, face unreadable. And then she said, "I don't trust you with money. I haven't for a long time." That sentence felt like a slap, not just because it was cruel, but because it was the first real emotion she'd shown since everything began. I asked her, "Then why didn't you just say that? Why did you marry someone you didn't trust? Why let me drown in bills while you hoarded cash behind my back?" She said nothing, just stared at the floor. The silence that followed was worse than yelling. It stretched between us like a canyon. And in that moment, I knew the version of our marriage I'd been clinging to was gone. Whatever foundation we'd built in those early years had cracked long ago, and I'd been the fool standing on it, pretending the tremors were just wind. I didn't plan to do anything drastic at first. I thought maybe space would fix it. Maybe Nicole just needed time to realize how unfair she'd been. So I pulled back, not out of spite, but self-preservation. I stopped asking questions. I stopped trying to bridge the gap. I still helped with Ava, did the chores, went to work, but emotionally I detached. I had to. Because the truth is, loving someone who's shutting you out is a special kind of hell. Every attempt to connect starts to feel like throwing a lifeline to someone who doesn't want to be rescued. But the moment I knew I couldn't keep living like this, truly knew, was a Wednesday morning in late February. Ava had spit up on her onesie. So I went digging through the laundry basket for something clean. That's when I found an envelope tucked inside one of Nicole's hoodies. It wasn't sealed. I pulled it out and felt the weight of it immediately. Stacks of $100 bills. Not a check, not a bank slip. Actual cash. I counted $7,000. Just like that. 7 grand, sitting in a pile of laundry while our joint account couldn't cover a damn pizza. That moment flipped a switch in me. I wasn't just confused anymore. I was done. That day, I opened my own account at a different bank, transferred my next paycheck directly into it, changed the password on my savings app. For the first time in our marriage, I stopped sharing everything. Not out of revenge, but out of necessity. I started documenting things too. The transfers, the missing money, the cash I found, not because I wanted to use it against her, but because something deep in my gut told me I needed to protect myself. The man who used to trust Nicole with his whole life was gone. And the man that was left, he had a daughter to think about. Ava was the anchor I clung to. Her existence reminded me daily that I couldn't fall apart, no matter how much I wanted to. I started taking longer shifts again, piling up money of my own, small but growing. Every dollar felt like a brick in the wall I was slowly building between myself and the version of life I'd been living. And that wall? It started giving me clarity. I began to look at our relationship through a different lens. Not the nostalgic one, but the truthful one. I remembered how, even back in our early days, Nicole had always kept a certain part of herself guarded. Not cold, but private. When her father passed away in 2020, she never let me in. She cried in the bathroom with the door locked. When I tried to hold her, she pulled away. I thought it was grief. Now I wondered if that had just been her pattern all along. I started therapy. Not together. Not couples therapy. Just me. I went to a community counselor who offered sliding scale sessions. Sat in a chair in a beige room, and talked for the first time in years about how lost I felt. The therapist, Marcus, didn't offer solutions. He asked questions. And those questions pulled things out of me I didn't even realize were there. Like how I always felt like I had to prove I was good enough. Like how I worked myself to the bone. Not just for survival but for approval. Like how I let love turn into labor. And labor turn into silence. And silence become the grave of every conversation we should have had. One session Marcus said something that stuck with me. He said trust isn't just broken by lies. It's broken by secrets. Even the ones we tell ourselves. That line haunted me. Because I realized I'd kept a secret too. The secret that I was miserable long before I found that receipt. That I'd been shrinking in my own home. Hoping love would be enough to fill the cracks. In March, Nicole's mom came to visit for a weekend. She pulled me aside one afternoon. Asked how I was doing. I hesitated, but then I told her the truth. Without blaming Nicole, without sugarcoating. Just the facts. About the money. About the silence. About how lost I felt. She didn't look surprised. That alone said a lot. She sighed, rubbed her temples and said something like Nicole's always been fiercely independent. Sometimes too much. She learned that from me. I'm afraid. I didn't know what to say to. The next day, I found Nicole in the kitchen feeding Ava and asked her calmly if she wanted a divorce. Not as a threat. Not out of anger. Just a question. She looked up, startled. For the first time in weeks, I saw something real in her eyes, fear. No, she said. I told her that I couldn't live like this anymore. That I couldn't be married to a ghost. That whatever we had left wasn't sustainable if she didn't start telling the truth. She didn't answer. But she cried. Not a lot. Not loudly. Just a few tears. And then she walked away. That night, she sat on the edge of the bed and finally spoke. She told me the money came from her father. A trust she didn't tell anyone about. Not even her mom. He'd set it up before he died, and it became hers in full when she turned. She said she kept it secret because it made her feel safe. That word safe hit me in the chest. I asked her, safe from what? Me? She didn't answer. But I could see in her face she didn't know either. It wasn't personal. It was a life of keeping control, keeping things close, never needing anyone, even me. She apologized, not with flowers, not with big promises. Just a simple raw, I'm sorry. It was the first honest thing I'd heard from her in months. I didn't forgive her that night. That's the first thing I want to make clear. Because real forgiveness isn't a switch you flip. It's not something you declare just because someone cried or confessed. Or finally let down their guard. It's something you build or rebuild brick by brick. Often slower than either person wants. But that night, when Nicole finally opened up about the trust fund, when she admitted she didn't even trust herself with it, let alone anyone else, something shifted. Not dramatically. Not all at once. But enough. Enough for me to stay in the room. Enough for me to listen. I learned things I didn't know. About how after her father's death, money became her way of controlling the chaos. About how she'd seen her mother struggle with nothing after the funeral, fighting insurance companies, selling jewelry just to make mortgage payments. Her dad had handled everything. And when he was gone, it all crumbled. Nicole was 26 when he died. And something inside her decided she would never be that helpless again. So when the trust transferred over to her on her 30th birthday shortly after we got married, she didn't see it as a gift. She saw it as a lifeline. One she never wanted anyone to cut. Not even by accident. It didn't make everything okay. But it made sense. And in some strange, terrible way, I understood. Because I'd been doing the same thing in a different costume, hoarding stress. Burying fear. Shielding her from how scared I was about our future. I thought working 2 jobs made me strong. I thought never complaining made me noble. I thought pretending everything was fine meant I was protecting my family. But all I was really doing was hiding my own wounds while resenting her for hiding her. That irony haunted me. We agreed, after that talk, to go to couples counseling. I wasn't sure it would help, but it felt like the only path left that didn't lead straight to a dead end. We started weekly sessions on Tuesdays. Marcus referred us to a woman named Tara, who specialized in relationships and financial trauma. Those first few sessions were brutal. Nicole cried once and didn't talk again for the rest of the hour. I said things I didn't realize I'd been bottling up for years. Things about feeling invisible, about how I'd started doubting my own worth in the marriage. We didn't hold hands. We didn't kiss after. But we kept showing up, and sometimes that's all healing looks like, just showing up. Eventually Nicole gave me access to the trust account. Not because I asked, because she wanted to. She even said it doesn't feel like mine anymore. It feels like ours. We used some of it to pay off the credit cards and refinance the mortgage, set up a college fund for Ava, and put a chunk of it into a joint savings account with both our names on it. That part was hard for her. I saw it in her hands, how they trembled slightly when she signed the transfer forms. But she did it anyway. That was the thing about trust. It wasn't about what she gave me. It was about what she gave up. The fear. The illusion of control. The need to protect herself at all costs. And in return I gave up my pride. I admitted I'd spent too long thinking I had to earn my place as a provider. That I'd equated money with love. Sacrifice with loyalty. Struggle with purpose. That wasn't partnership. That was martyrdom dressed up as manhood. We both had to unlearn some things. And little by little we did. We started having money meetings twice a month. Just the two of us, after Ava was asleep. We'd sit at the kitchen table with tea and go over bills, goals, even dreams. At first it felt awkward. Then it started to feel normal. And eventually, it started to feel good. Not perfect, not fairy tale, but real. We started talking about taking that trip to Ireland we once dreamed about. Back in the tiny apartment above the bakery, Nicole found an old folder on her laptop, with photos of castles and green hills, and cheap Airbnbs, near the coast. I didn't even know she'd kept. Turns out she had a lot of dreams tucked away in hidden corners. So did I. We started pulling them out, one by one. I wish I could say everything was solved, that we never fought again, that the scars disappeared. But that's not life. That's not marriage. The truth is, even now, months later, there are still days when I look at her and wonder if I really know her. But those moments are fewer now, and when they come I say them out loud. I ask her. I bring them into the light. And most times she answers. We've rebuilt something. Not the same thing we had before. Something quieter, slower, more intentional. And Ava, she's thriving, crawling now, babbling non-stop. Her laugh still feels like medicine. When I hold her, I feel like maybe, just maybe, we've made it through the worst of the storm. The other night Nicole came and curled up next to me on the couch after Ava had gone down. We weren't watching anything, just sitting in the quiet, her head on my chest, like it used to be. And she said, I don't want to hide from you anymore. I didn't say anything back. I just held her a little tighter. Because the truth is, secrets will always exist in relationships. Big ones. Small ones. Even unintentional ones. But what matters is what you do when the truth finally breaks the surface. Do you run? Do you punish? Or do you stay? And for now, that's